Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Parent Cafe podcast. I am Sarah,
My name is Allie.
and today we have back Miss Anna Vanderhaeg. Hello, Anna.
Thank you
Welcome
for
back.
having me back. Wonderful. I
Today
really
we,
appreciate it.
anytime, we love having you. Today last week we talked about, was it last week or was it 2 weeks ago now?
Week before last.
Week before last, anyways. Okay, we talked about 8 senses: smell, hearing, sight, taste, touch, pro proprioception, pro
Yeah.
okay, vestibular, and interoception. I was
Woo.
like, am I even saying that right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So we talked about that, and now we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty with Anna. So
Wonderful.
let's
Which could mean
go.
so many things.
I know. You're like, oh no, what is it going to be today?
It's a surprise. You
How
better
can I
listen.
That's right. How can I be helpful? So thank you so much for having me back. My name is Anna, and my last name is long, so usually people just call me Miss Anna or Anna the OT. And so you can find me I have a Facebook page, Anna VOT, and I'm also locally here in Edson, Alberta, and people can find me at the Edson Leap Center. So I have been an OT for over 20 years, and the last almost 10 years been specializing just in pediatrics, and so working with families and children with different developmental needs. And yeah, sensory processing is a huge area of pediatric occupational therapy, and it's just a huge part of being a human. And usually I get called in when there's difficulties, when there's like a mismatch of where the body and the brain is able to interpret the sensations of the body and the environment, and the environment the child is in or the person's in, and the demands in that environment. So yeah, so that I often get called in when there's difficulties, obviously. So last podcast was pretty long, and we were really trying to talk about just the 8 senses, because oops, can't even put up the right numbers. 4 like this or 8 like this. And because it's so important for people to understand that there's more than 5 senses, and how that impacts, and like how the actual brain kind of interprets that information. And so just a really short recap. Just like Sarah said, there's like the 8 senses that we're going to focus and talk about. And there's like the outside senses, what people call like the outside senses. So your hearing and sight, taste, smell, and touch. And then your inside body senses, proprioception, vestibular, and interoception. And so and they generally just kind of happen, and it all works and naturally happens, and we don't really give it much thought. And then when there's problems, it's like really surprising to people that there's so much going on with sensory processing.
Hey, Anna.
Yeah.
So Sarah and I yesterday, we were texting, and I sent Sarah this video of a girl that was doing like
Backflips.
backflips on
Yeah.
a mat. She was maybe like like 5 or 6 years old, and kept going and going and going, and she did so many that it like created a beat, and someone else was like singing a song to it. And so I sent it to Sarah, and then Sarah's first reaction was, how is she, like, how dizzy was she after she did that? And then we were like, but was she dizzy?
Yes.
So I was gonna
Look
ask
at that.
you.
Look what
Yeah.
I
know.
Woo!
So
I've thought about it so much since our last conversation.
Yeah, we instantly were like, well, would she be dizzy? Because Sarah and I, as adults, would be extremely dizzy. I probably wouldn't be able to get through one backflip.
Yeah.
But for her, she did like probably 20 to 30 of them, like consecutively going. And so which of the senses is that?
So great question. And it's really cool that you guys are thinking differently than you were before.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because, and I really like how you're thinking like, but was she? Because we'll talk by the end of this is like, really, I want to get to like, what are strategies that you can do as a parent or caregiver or whatever to help your kids, right? Like who are struggling. And one of the things, like the most important thing is to like recognize that how they're feeling might not be how you would be feeling.
Right.
So like that's like step one. It's like acknowledgement, right? Like that our brains are all different, and our body senses things differently, and how we feel comfortable or uncomfortable with that sense is all different.
Look at us, Sarah.
Yay,
I know.
We're winning.
When I spin around with Abby, I think that now too. I'm like, mommy needs to sit down, but you can keep going.
Yes,
You don't
yes.
feel that way.
And like that is so cool. So going back to your question of like what senses, so it actually like it isn't a simple like we don't just use one sense at a time, right? And so it's really, really hard to use one sense at a time. So you have to kind of think of the combination of senses there. So what senses do you think are stimulated when you're doing that?
I think vestibular.
Yep.
I think interoception.
I don't
Or
remember.
no, was it proprioception is where your body is in space?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm gonna go like heavy in vestibular and proprioception.
Yep.
And then maybe visual.
Yeah.
And touch.
Oh,
touch.
Oh,
visual.
Oh, I guess so.
Yeah.
Because I know when I get dizzy, it's like in my eyeballs.
Yes. Yeah. And okay. Hey, cool point. So in the eyeballs is an interoception.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
So it's like all of them almost.
Yeah. So the whites of your eyes, like you know when you get like the scratchy feeling, like I have a kind of a scratchy eye the last day and a half, and that is not a touch sensation. That's actually the eyeball, the whites of your eyes that have little receptors in them that's sending feedback to your brain. So yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Pressure, right? The pressure.
So proud.
I know.
I'm feeling very proud. It's a proud OT moment here.
You've taught us so much.
I know. We can put it into our daily lives now.
Yep.
Really, really cool. So for that child, flipping backwards and multiple times is not causing her any distress. It's not causing her any illness or injury or stress. It's not causing her any dysfunction, and so we wouldn't call that any difficult, like there's no issue there. There's no disorder. There's no problem there. It's probably really good if she's into gymnastics. It's probably actually a fabulous skill to be able to integrate those senses really well. So and her flexibility and all of that motor planning that comes with being able to have really accurate proprioceptive and vestibular senses, which make her coordinated and know where her body is in space and be able to do those things. So really necessary for that kind of function. So the difficulty comes when your function is impacted by your body not integrating or having difficulty understanding the environment sensations and your body sensations. So it's only a problem if your body is having problems discerning the senses from your environment or from your body and or together, because they kind of all go together, which causes causes either illness or injury or stress and anxiety or some sort of difficulty functioning in that environment. Okay. So then if there's a difficulty functioning in that environment, or you are actually causing discomfort or pain or illness to your body and you're not recognizing it, then that's where people would say something like you have a sensory processing disorder or difference that causes a disorder. Okay. So lots of us have differences in our sensory processing. We don't all fit like smack in the middle. We've got little outlying areas of differences in our sensory processing. But if the match between the environment and our function are okay, we can manage it. That's fine. It's not a disorder. So that's kind of when there's a mismatch between those and there's more functional difficulties. And as an occupational therapist, that's what we're really looking for, is like that functional deficits, the difficulties being able to manage your everyday activities because of your sensory processing is impacted. So and yeah, so I mean that, you know, again, sometimes what causes it is that, you know how I was showing the cups last time, and we all have different size cups for each of our sensory systems, and and that's typical. Like, we're not going to all have like straight on boring the same things. That would be very we wouldn't be very colorful as people, right? It's like, because that helps kind of create our personalities and stuff like that. And what happens is, if we don't have a balance between the sensory info that's coming into our brain and our nervous system, and then that balance dysregulates us and causes us to get dysregulated, where our sensory nervous system goes into the fight, flight, fright, freeze type thing. Okay. So then that's again where, when we don't, again, that happens once in a while to all of us, like that's normal. But if it's continuously happening, then that's not a good thing. That's causing really us to be in this dysregulated state so often, and highly stressful, highly anxiety provoking, highly traumatic for those people's nervous systems. Yeah. If you made me have to do these backflips constantly over and over, I would just get fearful that you were asking me to do that, because I know I would be getting nauseous. Like the thought of it just makes me nervous.
The thought of it makes my eyes hurt.
Yeah.
Like, the thought of it is like, my eyes are going to explode out of my head if I try to do that many backflips.
Yes.
You can't even do a backflip to begin with.
Just thinking about it, not even doing it, causes your nervous system, your brain, to be like, what?
Well, yeah, just like last time, you know, driving over the Brazos Dam, like thinking about it makes me like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I have to drive over that.
And again, slow. I like, right. So we, as adults, we choose what sensory experiences we put ourselves in. Generally, like we have a choice of what sensory experiences we want. Are we feeling like we want to go shopping today? Like, or are we feeling like we've just had too much and we don't want to go shopping today? Right. Those are our choices that we can make as an adult. All the time. All the time we get those choices. We get that control. There's certain things we don't have control over, and then therefore we try to control parts of those areas then that we can't have control over. Okay, I have to go grocery shopping. Okay, which store am I going to go to that maybe is less busy and less overwhelming, or maybe I won't see as many people or whatever. And you can make those choices. But as a child, unfortunately, those choices are often not given to a child, because again, we have as parents and as caregivers, we have like an agenda that we want to follow, and we have things we need to do, and it's really hard to be really flexible to everybody's like neurodiversities, you know, like their differences with their sensory processing. So when you know, there's kind of the term neurodiversity that's getting used a lot more in the last couple years, and kind of getting a lot of, I'm hoping, is kind of going into the mainstream vocabulary. So neurodiversity is just differences in how our brain processes sensory information. That's all it is.
So I have a question. When you know someone, like say you're going on a road trip and you're going with a person that usually, like, you get in the car and the first thing they do is fall asleep. Like, no matter what time of day, they're instantly sleeping. Is that like a coping? Like, would you, because it's not, I have a hard time with that. Like, I don't want to sleep any time of day just in the car, but some people do. Is that like maybe they don't like driving? Is it the movement? Is it like, would you attribute that to sensory?
Yeah, so like, I'm not gonna like be able to explain for that person, obviously, but
can't like call them out
because everyone's unique. So I'm gonna explain two different extremes to that. Okay. So sometimes when I start working with families who have really little kids, they will explain that their child will these are with children who have sensory processing differences already. Okay, this is not your typical child. So I'm going to do one extreme and then flip back to your typical sensory processing. So with the kids who actually have a really hard time taking in all the sensory information from especially the environment, right? Their environment. What they'll tend to do is they'll tend to shut down. And so the freeze type of situation, and they will actually use sleep as a coping mechanism to manage the huge environmental stuff. And so they'll say, yeah, like we would take them into Walmart or whatever, and they like literally would like fall asleep in the cart and like pass out. And I'm like, wow, like, that's really telling for me. For me, it's really telling as an occupational therapist. We also have then that can happen with car rides too, right? So we also have the opposite where it is actually so relaxing, that sensation of being in the car and that gentle movement and maybe a little bit of background noise that kind of ends up like that humming of the car tires and that, just kind of it can be very soothing and calming for some kids. And it can be very calming and soothing for adults too, because again, just because you mature and get older, your sensory system is still a sensory system. Right. It still processes things comfortably or uncomfortably. So for that person who might be an older person, they might actually be able to say, yeah, it's like, I'm just like lulled to sleep in the car, and that's really relaxing for me.
I guess
and the same for the young kid, right? Same for the young kid.
My example is obviously an adult. The reason I bring it up is only because it only happens in car rides. Like otherwise they don't really sleep during the day. They being my fiance, I'm just going to call him out. Because the reason I'm asking is like, we will go on like longer road trips. And when I am passenger, I don't want to fall asleep because if something happens, I want to be alert and be able to help. And so then the other side of that is that I feel like if I fall asleep, I'm going to make the driver sleepy because I'm sleeping. So they're going to look over at me and be like jealous that I'm sleeping and start feeling sleepy, which because it happens to me. So that's why. So when I'm passenger, I'm like aware and I'm like, okay, I can't sleep. And he's like, no, go to sleep. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It doesn't make me sleepy if you're sleepy. And I'm like, but I'm not sleepy. It's just like relaxing being in the car. So if I doze off, but I jerk myself awake because I feel bad.
Yeah.
For him, the instant I start driving, he can like go into the corner of the window and fall asleep instantly.
Yeah.
And like no care in the world. I'm like trying to turn the music up to stay awake because looking at him is making me sleepy. But it's just like
your neurons, your mirror neurons are like looking at him going, I'm sleepy because now I'm seeing what he's doing. And I'm like, I want to sleep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But and with that, like you're projecting a lot of like social kind of expectation for your
here I go projecting expectations. Story of my life.
this is really interesting because so you're projecting your sensory feelings, right? Yeah. How your body perceives sensory information onto somebody else.
Yeah.
And so I mean there's obviously safety things here going on too and that stuff, but really you're like how like I don't want to fall asleep because I might make him sleepy. Well, it doesn't affect him the same way as you, and you're having a hard time understanding how does that not affect you? It's the same thing as people saying it's just a tag in your shirt. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, in the sense of a sensory thing like that, when people dismiss that and you're like, but to them, it's a really big deal, like that really is bothersome to that child. And so that's why when we really validate each other's feelings in the sense of that is what they're experiencing, is there's no right or wrong. Like there is no right or wrong. That's just how it is. That's how your body experiences it. That's how his body experiences. That's that person's body experiences it. Now, is it can we compromise maybe somehow here? You know, like that's the next discussion, right? And that's what sensory processing and helping families and parents and caregivers understand, like, that sometimes we can compromise, and sometimes the brain we can't compromise. We just can't. Like, sometimes there's just certain senses that if you've gone into fight flight or you're feeling unsafe, there's no compromising.
Right.
There's no discussion, there's no compromising, there's no logical reasoning, there's none of that. It's all out the window. So yeah, so what I want to go on to next is, like, because I want to get to, like, some of the things that we can do, right? Like, so I want to do one more section, because one more little describing section, and then we can go into kind of what we can do about it, because again, it's so important for us to be able to, you know, as the caregivers or parents or therapists or whatever, is to be able to have at least some tools that we can, like, offer in the moment, or to make things a little bit better as people are figuring out their own sensory systems and what works for them and not works for them. So okay, so I'm gonna write down, I'm just gonna write something, because you know me now, I'm very visual. That's how I learn and
I
how
love
I kind of
it.
think. So okay, so signals not clear. Okay, so you can have your body signals that are not clear. You can have some body signals that are clear, and some body signals that are not clear. Okay, so I'm just writing. And some people who know me, I can't do two things at once. Signals not clear. Yeah, I really thought I was good at multitasking, and I really realized I'm awful at it. Some clear and some.
I'm the same. I, like, think I can, like, I know, I used to see Allie, and she's, like, working away, having a conversation, and, like, still doing it. And I'm like, I have to, like, have the conversation or work. It is not both.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, though, if I'm in that conversation and I'm working away, I'm literally typing nonsense, because I was reading somewhere the other day that multitasking can be like a form of procrastination.
Because you end up having to come back a million times.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is my next thing. So my next thing is, so you can have body signals that are clear, like not clear at all. Like, so body signals, all those 8 senses, the signals from our 8 senses, they can be not clear, just totally not clear. So you have difficulty noticing or connecting signals to an emotion or state or whatever in your body. Okay. Then you can have where some signals are clear and some signals are unclear. So again, some of those senses come into the body and you are able to notice them in your brain, and you're able to make connections to what you're feeling, emotions and such. And some you don't. So you kind of have got a mix of them. And then you've got where all the signals are generally coming in fairly clear. You know, as an occupational therapist, these aren't my kids that I'm working with, right?
Yeah.
So I'm working with these kids here, these populations of children and families.
Okay.
So for example, you can have signals in your stomach that you are feeling, like in your abdominal, I'm going to say abdominal area, because you've got your bladder, your colon, your stomach, all in that same area. And you can have body signals that are unclear, and you don't know if you're hungry, if you have to poop, if you've got gas, if you have to pee. Okay. So they can be totally unclear.
Okay.
Then you could have the same thing with some are clear and some are unclear. You know when you have to poop, but you aren't sure when you have to pee or if you're hungry. Right? Okay. And then you can, no difficulties, you know when you have to poop, you know if you have to pee, you know when you're hungry, you know when you're nauseous.
Right.
Okay. So again, thinking that all of those signals come from different organs, and so that's why they can be unclear or clear, or some clear and some not clear. I'm going to do this again with touch and tactile. So we talked last time how the tactile system has like multiple areas of sensory receptors that are coming in. So from vibration to deep touch to light touch to moving touch to pain, hot, cold, all those different sensations. So same thing with touch sensations. You can have really unclear touch sensations. So you can actually miss things like you don't even notice tags, or that your clothing's on funny on your shirt, like it's like twisted on your waist, and you don't notice that, like the tags, like I said, you don't notice when you hurt yourself, like you injure yourself, you have cuts, and you're like, how did you get that cut, buddy? You got a bruise on your head. I don't know. Like, so you can miss a whole bunch of stuff, like almost lots of them. Or you can have a mixture of this. So you can have like, oh yeah, I totally notice when I've got, like when someone touches me, I'm like, oh, yeah, you've touched me, but I'm maybe missing the pain sensations, and I'm not registering those ones as well. I'm noticing, I like them, or I'm noticing signals such as wetness, or I might not be noticing signals such as wetness on my skin, you know? So again, mix match of noticing them, and then I'm noticing them all. So I might miss some things, I might miss lots of things for tactile. Okay.
Do some of these like just like develop as you get older as well, like increase?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And so that's where like that's where a lot of this stuff, like toileting is a really good example, right? So if your sensory processing is developing on the path that kind of naturally happens, then the child's naturally going to become aware of the sensations in their stomach, abdominal area, sorry, not stomach, abdominal area, that mean I have to go pee or I have to go poop, right? And then they'll recognize, oh, they might even recognize, oh, I started to like kind of have like a pee a little bit, and then realize, oh, I just felt wetness in between my legs, and oh geez, I better stop and I better run to the bathroom and go pee, because they were able to recognize wetness, and they were able to which is a tactile sensation, and they were able to recognize the bladder sensation of fullness or discomfort or tightness or whatever that feeling is for them, and attribute it to need to go to the bathroom. I better get to the bathroom. Absolutely. So, I mean, they, babies aren't born with these abilities to recognize these things. They were all protected. There's some senses that are developing all inside the womb, but then as they're born in that first year, 2 years of life is so critical for them recognizing those things.
You mean they don't come programmed with wetness?
No.
They're all wet. They're covered in wet.
I always just think of the kids running around like the playground or whatever with a big wedgie and like pants,
or
like
their
one
pants
leg
are
up,
sideways.
Sideways. Yeah, that's just what I pictured when she said that. I'm like,
or shoes on the wrong foot.
Yeah, that's another one, right? That's that feeling of like you need to be able to have that feeling of kind of like pressure on like the shoe isn't fitting nicely, so you've got pressure on one side of the foot. That's like just a slight pressure on the skin sensation. You have to be able to recognize and notice that. So
maybe they like it though. I feel like I know so many toddlers who like purposely want their shoes on the wrong feet.
And again, maybe it's giving them a little extra sensation on their feet of where their feet are also in space, but that's a whole other discussion. Okay.
Let's not get into that story.
So we can have clear signals and unclear signals. And now I'm going to talk about clear signals and unclear signals a tiny bit more, because this is going to be like, aha.
Ooh, I like this.
I like
I'm excited for the aha.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but okay. So now I'm going to use some terms that Kelly Mahler uses, who's an OT who talks a lot about interoception and sensory processing and stuff. So I'm going to use some of her wording because I really like how simplistic it is and it really makes sense. Okay. So you can have See, I have
I
to
feel like
make.
there needs to be like a drum
Here's that
roll.
multitasking.
Ooh, I ran out of my whiteboard here. Okay, you can have signals
Yep.
that come in that are too big, like
Okay.
really big. So those signals that are coming in can be unclear because the signals are too big. So, everything you can, again, look at our sensory systems. We can talk about all of them separately, but I'm just going to be in general. Our signals can come in and they're like, everything is big signals coming into my brain. So everything is too bright and too loud and too itchy and too moving too fast and too everything. I always call it like a Tuesday, like everything is just too much for this kid, like, right? So the signals that are coming in from our sensory receptors that we all talked about last time are too intense and too big coming into the brain. And so again, we can have individual things that are like that, but generally a lot of them is just coming in too big. Okay, those are our sensory sensitive kids, hypersensitive kids, and often they are the ones that I get as an OT called into the most frequently because they're often having meltdowns and tantrums and such because they can't handle the environment and their body sensations. Like they're even upset when their body gets hot. Like, oh, I'm so hot. I'm so hot.
Yeah.
You know? Or the discomfort of like physical activity is painful to them. The sensation of their body, of their muscles being tight causes too much, too big a sensations into their brain. And it's interpreted as discomfort and, awfulness. Okay. So you can have that kind of unclear signals coming in that are generally all too big. Okay. Then the opposite, you can have signals coming in that are too little. That generally, we're again, overall, our sensory signals coming in from our 5 external senses and our 3 internal senses are too little. So you're just not noticing them because the signals coming in are really dampened and your brain isn't able to notice them. So those are your often your crashers and your bull in a china shop kids. They don't notice that they're banging into everything. They don't notice people calling them and talking to them. They don't notice when they've hurt themselves. They're stuffing their mouth full with food. They just are your like they are like just you like
tornado.
like, tornado and just like everything's like, and you're just like, whoa, slow down, buddy. Like,
I feel like that was me as a child.
Yes. Yeah. And so I see those kiddos too, right? Because sometimes later though, because then it's like, man, they're still like crashing into everything and they're so clumsy and they're having difficulties standing in line and stuff like that.
So you definitely see those kids usually later on, just because it's people I think, oh, they'll just grow out of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And like we discussed already, with experience and practice and play, some of those kids just grow out of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
They do. They just mature their way out of it. But some don't. And some end up with more of a difficulty with a lot of motor planning problems and motor output and writing and keeping up with their peers in gym class and then socially then that can be an issue as well, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And so so too little sensations. And also those are the kids who maybe not down the motor part of issues, but maybe down like the toileting stuff. So if their signals for their inside body abdominal things are too little, then they're not noticing their toileting signals or their hunger and thirst signals. And so they may be 9, 10, 11, 12 years old and still having issues with toileting, hunger and fullness sensations. and recognizing those things. So those would be our, two little
would
signals.
would that be kids who like are, I don't know if this is a whole different topic, like wetting the bed, stuff like that, or is it more so like all like consistently throughout the day, bedtime?
So, I mean, it can be a combination
Okay.
of just the nighttime, difficulties, or day and night.
Okay.
Obviously, I get the more significant ones,
Yeah.
which is more problematic during the daytime. Families and kids can manage the nighttime stuff,
Yeah.
and tend to do it in silence a lot more and hidden a lot more. But absolutely, it has something to do with those kids too, because
Okay.
the only way that you're going to able to wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom is if your body is able to recognize those signals to your brain, and their signals are strong enough, they're big enough for your brain to notice them when you're sleeping to wake yourself up.
Okay. I've read somewhere, I don't know where, that like those things are like hereditary, and like some people like they just do develop like back to like the bedwetting during night like that, um when they're developing, maybe that's just a little bit slower to develop, and then it's hereditary. Is that true?
Well, think of sensory processing
I
as a
know.
bit hereditary too, right?
Okay.
So if I'm sensory sensitive as an adult and my partner's sensory sensitive, we're probably going to have sensory sensitive kids.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's neurology, right? I mean, our kids are, so it's not like it's not a guarantee, obviously,
Yeah.
but very, very often we'll say, oh yeah, like, one of us is gonna, be able to say, I totally understand my kid because I was so like that, I've got
Right.
parts of that.
Okay.
So for bedwetting, again, if it's not if there's no actual real medical reason for it, like,
Yeah.
because there's other medical reasons that could
Mhm.
need to be ruled out first, obviously. Um, then it's usually a sensory processing
Okay.
thing. And if you're a person who can sleep so soundly that you don't notice your body signals to wake you up, then it doesn't really matter. Like, you're gonna have to, you've kind of got your sensory system against you to start with.
Okay.
So you're not gonna be like getting mad at this kid for not waking up in the night, because their body is sleeping so soundly, they are not noticing their body signals,
Okay.
versus the kid who's noticing their body signals all the time, and they're able to like wake up constantly, or maybe they're actually noticing they're uncomfortable a lot during the night, and that's your child also waking up, and you're having to recover them with a blanket, or add some more sensory feedback to them to help them out, and have them in a special, extra soft things for them. And I can
Okay.
I can do the examples of both extremes, even in my house.
Yeah.
So I think I had one of each, right? Just so that I had a lot more empathy for families.
You
So
have a lot of practice then.
yeah,
Yeah, there
a
you
lot more empathy as well. And then the last thing is, you can have signals, body signals from your senses that are distorted. Okay. So meaning that some are too big a sensations coming in, some are too little sensations coming in, and they're all wonky. And they can be wonky between the 8 senses. So you can have like you can have too big a sensations for lots of touch things, and too little sensations for lots of like the interoception stuff. And you can have too big sensations for auditory, too little sensations for visual, and can be all distorted all over the map. And then you can also have them distorted within each of those groups.
Okay.
Okay. And that's the ones that are really, really, really confusing to people and parents. The two big sensations, you can go, okay, my kid's hypersensitive to everything. It makes sense. And I can kind of create some things and that help my child out. And I can feel successful as a parent because they actually are pretty generally consistent. Like, they generally are always going to be sensitive to these things, and they don't generally change a whole lot. And I can feel pretty successful as a parent. And same with the too little sensations. We can talk about those. We can, again, it's the kids who have a really distorted signals, body signals that are coming in that are so confusing to everyone. And it is very difficult for people to tease out. And so what ends up happening is like, oh, they're just doing this on purpose. They can do it. I know they can do it, and I don't know why they're not doing it now. And it's willful behavior and stuff like that. And so there's very few, things that, I mean, obviously when kids want something, they want to kind of manipulate the situation so they get what they want. But I'm not talking about those things that are just like, I want a popsicle and you say no and they have a temper tantrum. That's, guess what, that's behavior.
That's just life.
They want their popsicle. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if they're able to manage in an environment, or if they're able to manage with a certain physical demands that you're asking of them, or cognitive demands of them. It can sometimes look willful, or but they have maybe really distorted sensory information coming into their body.
So does that mean that, like, if their like touch sensation is like always the big feeling, can it change to little? Like, can it be distorted in that way, like that it's both, or like changes all the time?
So what we often see is you have to like really like pull apart kind of what it is about touch, right? Because touch is one of the ones that is really confusing to people, because remember, there's so many parts of touch receptors. So you can have tags that are really, really bothersome for people, or you can have tags that people don't even notice, like they don't even notice, right? And the same with like clothing fabric. You can have people who have no care in the world of what type of clothing fabric they wear, and other people that are like, I don't like jeans, I don't like anything that's rough, I don't want to feel seams, right? And that's a different type of sensation, tactile sensation, touch sensation, than say a paper cut.
Right.
And a paper cut's is your pain receptors, your nociceptors that are getting triggered and fired, not your light touch sensation fibers that are getting triggered and fired.
Okay.
So yes, you can have differences there.
Okay.
And what I've also noticed too is, and I think this happens with a lot of kids that are just like, again, not on any sensory differences, but like they'll start recognizing certain senses like they hadn't really recognized them before, because they're starting to notice these things, and it's like, oh, I got a boo-boo, it's like every little thing is like a little boo-boo, you're just like, yeah, sweetheart,
it's my life right now.
Yes. And so a lot of that is them learning to notice them, these signals, which is so important.
Yes.
Right? And us validating that as the caregiver. Hey, let me see. Oh, I'm so sorry you got a sore. Let me see it. Oh, I want me to kiss it better. And then you're going to also start helping them recognize the intensity of that. You're not going to say, that's nothing, don't worry about it. You're going to say, oh, is there any blood there? Oh, I don't see any blood. That's a good thing. I bet it hurt, but no blood. That's a good thing. And you're just going to kind of like let them slowly figure out that it probably is not really that big in the scheme of things.
Now we don't need a Band-Aid every time we bump something.
That's right. And then you're slowly going to be like, oh, you know what? Band-Aids are really good for when there's blood. I don't see any blood because Band-Aids keep things clean, but we can put it under cold water, or we can rub it, or we can give it a kiss, and you're going to give them other strategies to manage the sensation that they're feeling. Because right now, that sensation of your toddler, which is really typical, what they do is really exaggerated right now for her, because she's noticing their signals. Right?
Which right now, we were going through a lot of dollar store Band-Aids because I'm not buying expensive ones. But yeah, like I'm trying to explain to her, oh, there's no blood. You don't need a Band-Aid, but maybe I need to put it in a different, like, more positive.
Yeah. And what are Band-Aids for usually?
Yeah.
Band-Aids are usually to keep a cut clean, or to keep dirt out of there,
Yeah.
But we can do other things to help with sores too, Elise.
Yeah.
And don't always need Band-Aids, because Band-Aids aren't the only solution. Moms are
Sometimes
good,
they need freezies.
That's right. But parents are good solutions, and caregivers are good solutions. Going to a trusted adult is a good solution. If you hurt yourself, you still want them to come to you. And a parent, if they've banged their head, they might not have any blood, but you want them to be able to come and say, yeah, I hit my head. Because you know, if it was a bad hurt, then you want to be able to monitor your kid and know that it happened.
Yeah. I think I had a parent one time come to me and she said, I think I've told my son, like, ignored him, like, being like hurt too much, being like, oh, it's fine, you're okay, that he doesn't come to me anymore when there actually is something wrong.
Right.
Like he was maybe like 5 or 6 or something like that. But yeah, she had already noticed that, because you know, like when you react, they react. So she really took that in. But it was like too much almost. So then the child literally just stopped and would walk around with like cuts and stuff like that.
That's right. And I mean, it's a balancing act, right? Like it's a balancing act for all of us, in the sense of like, how much attention do we give this, and then how much do we, you know, try not dismiss it, but try to make kind of put it in perspective, right? But again, we always have to remember that we're putting it in our perspective too. And so if you have a child who's going to be developing typically their sensory processing stuff, generally there's not going to be an issue going on. Like they just develop it and they just learn these things. And the kids who need extra help with that because their signals are too big, or they're too small, or they're distorted, then that's where, as a caregiver, we need to like try to figure out what it is, what is it there that we're dealing with, and then how do we support them? Because you're right, we don't want them to be ignoring everything and being saying, I'm fine, and you're like, buddy, you are bleeding, you are not fine, like, you know, that is not a good thing. And so so we want to really help with that. So so then moving on, we can talk about, and this is the part I want to talk about, and I'm hoping that people, it gives them ideas of what can we do then. Like, okay, now I kind of maybe have a little understanding of my child. And if you don't understand your child, like, please seek out an occupational therapist or somebody near you who has an understanding of sensory processing. Because like, being told or feeling like you're a bad parent, or that your child's bad, or being told it's some other reason, like it can be really, really discouraging, and just self-confidence shattering for parents as well. And then you lose your you lose your ability to, as a parent, to like just be able to like use your gut and figure it out, because now you're second guessing yourself on everything. So so I strongly encourage people to, if you're struggling with that, to seek out somebody to help you, and an occupational therapist or another professional who understands sensory processing and can help guide you with that, because it'll help your mental health. So and then you can help your kid more, or your child, or yourself. So I want to talk about, let's talk about the signals of, I'm going to just break it down into like the too big and then the too small signals. So if your body is feeling your signals, your child's body is interpreting their sensations coming into their body too small. Like, so the sensations are happening in all those senses, and the signals are getting passed along on the nerves up to the brain, and the brain is having to interpret it, but those signals are so dampened and small. So they feel the signal weakly, and they miss the signal altogether sometimes. And it can have medical and health consequences for that child. So meaning, like I mentioned, they could miss things like their need to eat, or their need for fullness, that they are full, that they have an injury. They may miss the cue that they have to go to the bathroom. They may miss that they're sick feeling, nauseous feeling, or that they have a headache. So these kids, you know, had a child tell me, oh, I didn't know I had a sore on my foot. And I had to actually go and get IV antibiotics. And I'm like, oh, like you're like in middle school. You did not notice you had an infected toe, you know? No, I didn't notice it. Well,
wow.
that's a real health issue, you know, for a potential health issue, obviously.
Yeah.
So, or if they miss eating, then their blood sugars can, you know, fluctuate a lot, and then you get some behaviors and such out of that. I know I'm that kind of person. If I miss and don't eat my food, then I'm not a very pleasant person to be with, right? So there's
Angry.
yeah, exactly,
Same.
right? Angry. So when a child is young,
I'm on an eating
and
schedule.
yeah, when a child is young, and when we as adults know that that's our system, like our issue, like I know that I don't feel the signals very strongly, or you know that your child doesn't feel those signals very strongly, then you're basically going to use like compensatory strategies and to outsmart your poor awareness of that, because your signals aren't big enough. Okay, you can't tell them, well, why didn't you feel it? You should have told me. Like, you can't do that. They don't feel those signals. It's not their fault that they didn't notice them. So like, that's number one. It's not their fault that they didn't notice them. Don't blame them for them. Don't question them for not noticing those things.
It's kind of like having an accident. Like if they have an
Exactly.
accident and it's like, why
Why
didn't
did
you tell
pee your
me?
pants?
Yeah.
What kid wants to pee their pants when they're
Right.
6 or 7 or 8? No kid
No.
wants to do that.
Yeah.
Right? So don't question them about that. Don't question them. Why didn't you tell me you hurt yourself? Where did you do that? They probably have no clue where they did that and when they did it. You know? And so number one is wrapping our head around the thought that that number one, they didn't notice it, so they couldn't tell you. Okay. And then our job then is to create systems in place to compensate for that until their body is able to recognize those signals. Okay. So lots of things like reminders, like, so you're going to create reminders about toileting, you're going to create reminders about snacks, you're going to create reminders about clothing that they're going to wear so that they don't go outside when it's freezing cold, or they're going to have the right appropriate clothing on. You're going to create schedules and timers and visuals for that stuff to help them. You're going to make sure that you feed your kid snacks every day instead of skipping snack time. You're just going to make sure that as a parent, you're going to say, okay, the schedule is that before we go on car rides, everyone goes to the bathroom. That's just the routine and expectation. It's not, do you need to go to the bathroom? Because are they going to feel those sensations and answer you accurately? Probably not. You're going to start your car ride, and 10 minutes later, they're going to be like, I have to go to the bathroom, because now the sensations are super intense and now I can feel them. Okay. So yeah, you're going to, you know, do a lot of that kind of embedded in your day kind of systems that are going to help that person manage. And you know, there are adults who do that too. We make sure we pack a lunch so we eat our lunch. Otherwise, I might forget to eat my lunch, or I might block off time, you know, to have some downtime so that I don't have like so much stuff throughout the whole day. Like, we do this as adults. So we need to do this for our kids. Okay, more things with this. We need to make sure that whoever else is working with your child or looks after your child, that's grandparents, other caregivers, preschool settings, things like that, understand that too.
Yes.
You really need to understand that. Because if your child is busy playing with games and such, and they're not paying attention to their body signals, and their body signals are too small, guess what? They're going to have lots of accidents.
Right.
Guarantee. And again, you're not going to say, hey, ask Johnny if he has to go to the bathroom every once in a while. No, you're going to say mom, dad, grandparents or caregivers or, daycare. Just take them to the bathroom every hour.
Yeah. Yes.
No.
I love that because like there is usually like that inconsistency and like lack of communication is why like you can't like progress a little bit more because like, oh well, they're fine at home, but when they go to daycare they're not, but everyone's not following that same routine of going to the bathroom every hour or whatever.
It's kind of like when you start potty training and you have them in care, and at home you're like doing the potty training, and then when they're in someone's care they're maybe not doing it the same way you are.
That's right. And that's where and especially for potty training, like I'm a big like believer in like I do a deal with a lot of potty training stuff and toileting stuff, and I'm like when you're ready, like make sure you're ready to do it first as a family unit to do it, because there's no reason to tackle it beforehand, because again, you have to be responsive to that child, and that child has to be paying attention to their body, and you have to be really having a system in place that you can create some structure and predictability for this child too. You have to be monitoring food and intake and all of that stuff, and you have to be present and ready. So when you're ready to do all that, then do it. Don't stress yourself out trying to do it halfway. Again, some kids just do it. They just potty train themselves. Again, those aren't the kids that we're talking about here. These aren't the families that I'm trying to help and support here. My one of my kids just like, did that. And I'm just like, seriously? You just did that? Like, this was at the second one. So the first one I'm like, oh my god, are we gonna get there? And the second one I'm like, well, that just happened in like a matter of like a week. That's weird. Right?
The second one's following the first one probably too.
Well, I mean, you would like to think that, but that has nothing to do with it. It's all to do with their sensory processing, and they totally match the I don't feel signals very strongly, therefore potty training is going to take a lot longer, and I feel every single signal really, really big, and that's uncomfortable, so I'm going to potty train really quickly. So
I know we're not talking about potty training, but we have a lot, so I'm just going to ask, is there a difference like with boys feeling their sensory processing later with toileting? Because like I know like that's a big myth, like that boys are usually harder to potty train, they take longer. Is that anything is that a thing, or is that just a myth?
Well, it's not really a myth. Like, I mean, there's some truth to that, in the sense that potty training for boys can be a little bit later, and there's some physiological reasons, like actually anatomical reasons why that's the case for boys and girls, and it can also be sensory wise, that again we sometimes see that boys that tend to be a little bit more like a rougher and tumbler and not noticing their signals as easily because they're so engrossed in other things. Again, sometimes it's not super gender focused, but it can be where I can process one sensory information at a time, so therefore if I'm really focused on visually looking at something that I'm playing with, then I'm not going to be noticing my signals as much. Again, there are slight gender differences with those things. I can't like comment on like what the studies show, if they're showing that kind of stuff, but functionally we see that often. I don't know if neurologically we can prove if that's proven anywhere.
Okay, sorry, random off topic.
And so with those kids that are feeling signals too small, then you are going to support them with all of that stuff. You're going to help them learn and grow and notice those signals by pointing out some of your own signals, like, oh, mommy's stomach is kind of hurting. I must be hungry. I better go and get something to eat. Oh, I wonder if is your tummy making funny feelings in there too? Maybe it's hungry too. Let's see, look at your tummy down there. Like, do you notice anything down there? Does it feel anything down there? And maybe getting them to pause and look and think about their stomach and try to attach some sensations to their body to see if they notice those things. So we can start modeling those things. And if they do notice something, then you're going to be like, you're not going to dismiss them. So if they're like, yeah, I think I'm hungry, you're like, right, really cool, let's eat something. Because then you're not going to be like, no, you can't be hungry, you don't eat right now, it's not time to eat. For those kids, you want them to actually notice it. Like, you want them to notice those signals. And so that's awesome. So for the kids who are feeling too big a sensation, so they're feeling these sensations coming at them like overload, like it is overwhelming to their body when they are feeling so many sensations coming in all the time. They can't discern the emotions they might be feeling. They can't and I mean emotions by their homeostatic emotions, what makes them feel comfortable, like hunger, thirst, and discomfort, need to go to the bathroom, illness, all that kind of stuff, and their actual affective emotions like sadness, happiness, excitement, disappointment, fear, that kind of stuff. So because of that, because all these sensations are coming in like, whoo, then they're often feeling unsafe.
Okay.
So because they're feeling unsafe, they have anxiety often associated with that. And so what they tend to do is they tend to try to need to control things. They need sameness and predictability and want of control, or they'll latch on to some of like their like feel good things that help make them feel good, because then that helps them feel safe, and it helps with that overwhelming sense all the time. Okay. So
that makes so much sense.
Yeah. So number one, I'm going to say it again. Accept people experience sensory signals differently. Okay. They can feel them too much. They can feel them not very well. Okay. Number one, so accept it and then validate that they're feeling that way. And then, so, oh my God, my finger, it hurts so much. Oh man, I can see that must really hurt you. You don't need to agree with them that it should hurt, but you need to validate that you see that it hurts them. Okay. And
I like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I see that is really bothering you right now. I hear that is really bothering you right now. Oh, that must feel awful. I'm not saying it feels awful for me, because it doesn't. And I'm thinking in my head what lots of people think. Oh my God, you're being a drama queen.
Right.
That is a judgment call for me to say you're being over dramatic right now. That can't be too big. Okay.
Because you don't know.
Yeah.
That's the difference where people get stuck on, like, oh, they're being like overly dramatic.
Yeah.
Yes, in my opinion, in my brain, how my body interprets sensory information, they're being over dramatic. Absolutely. But they are experiencing sensory information differently than me, and I need to validate that. And I need to accept that how they're feeling, their body is uncomfortable right now. They are feeling anxiety. It is not a good feeling at all. I mean, that is not a good feeling. If you think of yourself when you're in that feeling, that's an awful feeling. So if they're feeling like that a lot of the time, that is not fun to feel like that. So it's not you, when someone tells you, oh, calm down, stop it, like that's nothing, and you're feeling like that, that is like a trigger for me. Like, I'm like, just leave. Like, get out. Do not
tell me to relax.
Yeah.
Don't tell me to
dare
calm down
you.
and relax. That is the worst thing you can say to me.
Yeah.
And that is generally our first go-to thing that we tend to naturally try to do.
Well, even though like you're being too dramatic is oddly familiar.
Yes. Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm definitely guilty of saying that to my
Oh,
toddler as well.
Yeah, it is
You
so
are being
easy.
dramatic.
It is so
Yeah.
easy.
So
So
at least
I'm
she
not,
is feeling all those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, they are feeling all those feelings. It is not your, you do not need to agree with them that you, that you feel it the same way. You do not have to agree with them, and that you just need to validate, you need to acknowledge that they must feel uncomfortable right now, and that you see that they're uncomfortable right now. That's it. Okay. And then your next thing out of your mouth should be like, how can I help you make it better?
Right.
Not calm down.
Yeah.
Would you like me to give you a hug? Would you like me to, right?
Right.
How can I help you? I'm so sorry. That sucks. You
It
know?
was like yesterday when she wanted me to hold her, but I can't touch her.
Yeah.
So like, how do I do this?
Yeah. Come, let
Yeah.
me give you a squish. I won't use my hands.
Yeah.
I'll squish
Yeah,
with
I think
my
that's what it
arms.
was. Yeah. So like she like laid on me, but it was like I couldn't be on the couch. I had to sit on the chair.
Yeah.
Like just like she was just at that
Yeah.
time.
Just overwhelmed. Right?
Overwhelmed, tired, and yeah.
Yeah.
Aww.
Yeah, just for overwhelm. And so you providing that connection piece with her is allowing her body then to be able to release some of those neurochemicals that we talked about last time. That's going to help her co-regulate down.
Oh,
Because co-regulation, being a partner helping to regulate that person, is critical to help more quickly get them to come down. And so for these kinds of kids, you're going to do things like you're going to be the parent who's always going to have a snacks packed in your purse or bag or whatever. You're going to always have little options of different types of clothing, like maybe layers of clothing, so that when they're hot and cold, then you can say, hey, would you like this now? Maybe you want a tank top or a t-shirt instead, because now you're like, I'm so hot, and you're like, oh my God. You might have sunglasses and a hat available for them, so that, again, these are things that you can have with you, that's going to help with them. You're going to have items that might help them feel good. So they're feel good items. You're going to have them with you probably when you go on outings and when you go places, because that's going to help them also be able to feel better and about themselves. And so those items might be a favorite item, like toy or a blankie or things like that. So those are maybe some of the items that you're going to have. You're going to also make sure that they have a way to communicate with you that is really awful for them. So again, if they lose their words because they get so upset, then you're going to try to be like, do you want this or do you want this? Like, let me try to help you figure it out, buddy. Like, you're going to try to give them that. If they use an alternative communication system like visuals or pictures or an iPad, you're going to make sure that they have words on there, so that you can help try to get to the page that they have, so that they can maybe hopefully communicate with you what it is that they need for to help. You're going to allow them the opportunity to leave briefly or get to a quiet space. It may not mean like totally bolt from the situation. It may just mean, let's go take a break in the car for a little bit. Let's go take a break in a different room for a little bit. So those mini breaks are so important for them. And you're going to share that information again with whoever's looking after your child or who works with your child. And if they don't understand it, you're going to keep making sure that they understand it.
Okay.
So those are like, again, the kids can't use strategies on their own if they don't have the interoception awareness and sensory processing awareness. They can't do it. So if they're still building the sensory processing awareness and they're still building that interoception skills of their internal body signals and noticing them correctly to body signals and emotions, if they're not there yet, then they can't use strategies. So it doesn't matter how many cool strategies you have in place. Right. If they can't have the skills yet to recognize those, they can't use them. Right. So it's our job as the more mature adult responsible for that child to step in and be that support.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like it.
So like, and again, it's, it's practice, and there's errors. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I'm like, I'm so sorry. That was not what you needed. I'm sorry, buddy. Hold on. Let's try that again. Let's find, okay, it's not that. And you just talk it out loud. Like, instead of saying, oh, for goodness sakes, just give me a break. You're just gonna be like, I'm sorry, I got the wrong thing. Let's try to figure it out. It's not that. Let's try to find this. And you're gonna just work it out loud with these kids.
Okay.
To try to problem solve. Yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
Very cool.
I think there's a lot of like self-awareness from the adult side. So
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Your experiences are not their experiences and vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yay!
In a nutshell.
Thank you. So
awesome.
If anyone listening has any specific questions, or if something kind of came up while you were listening, topic wise, that you feel like you'd like to hear more about, or if you feel like you need some extra help, feel free to reach out to Anna. Anna's busy lady and she's ready for you.
Always reach out. Absolutely. Yeah. Or if you have your own therapist, reach out to them. Yeah, absolutely. So important. And follow me on my Facebook page. I post a lot of stuff on sensory processing. And so, and there's so many wonderful pages out there. Other pages, I just post a few things. So yeah.
Yes. And at any age.
And at any age,
yes,
all important at any age. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I feel like I've learned a lot about like myself and about like others around me as well, like adult wise, like how their sensory processing is different than mine. So it really was an eye opener, Anna.
That's awesome. And I hope that gives us all a little bit more kindness and acceptance of each other's differences, and that that's a whole lot of like the whole acceptance thing of neurodiversities and differences and how we process stuff, and it's all okay. It's just different.
Yeah, and it helps to just not immediately flip to that frustration of like, you're so dramatic, like, right? Because they're not, if they're feeling it that way. Plus, I find if you acknowledge, oh, I hear you, I understand that hurts you so bad, they might even turn around and be like, no, it really wasn't that bad. And then you're like, okay.
Yeah, and then that's fine too, because then they're going to start understanding like the gradation of how big it is. Because usually our sensory sensitive kids, everything's like super high. So then, then they'll figure it out. But then you're not going to be like, well, why did you do that? Don't question them. They'll get there.
Work it out.
I love
They'll work it out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
My brain is so big.
Have a great day.
We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Bye.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye.